All right, guys, back with another edition of Plus Money Picks, coming off of a profitable week, which I'm pretty excited about. A lot of that was due to a four-legged parlay where I had William Knight, Alexandre Pantoja, Brian Kelleher, and then Jared Cannonier to cap it off. And then on that main event, I had also bet that the fight would go to decision. So really, once that main event finished up, it kind of culminated my night and made it a pretty profitable one. So I'm pretty excited about that. And now I'm looking forward to this card because, I think last week people weren't thinking it was going to be a great card, but it definitely delivered. And I think this one definitely has a lot of potential. And I think especially people that have been following The Ultimate Fighter are going to be pretty excited about this card. So first fight of the night, we have Martinez and Guido Canetti. So this one's pretty straightforward as far as a betting perspective. Canetti, all of his losses are by finish. He's 41. He's 2-4 in the UFC. He's also low volume and isn't great defensively. The one thing that could be to his advantage in this fight is if he gets a takedown, which he's the more capable fighter with getting takedowns in this one. But Martinez, he's about 16 years younger. He's a lot faster. He'll have a slight reach advantage, and he's got a lot more power. So I think you take Martinez inside the distance if you're going to make a play on this one. Betting him straight doesn't really make sense at this point because he's all the way up in the minus 300 range. The bets I made on this one, I bet the under 1.5, which that might be the more risky play in this one because it could kind of be more deep into round two. And then I also bet Martinez by knockout, but I just had a smaller play on that compared to the under. That's basically where I stand on that fight. We'll move on to the next one, which is a much, much closer fight. So we have Pat Sabatini and Jamal Emers. Pat Sabatini, he is 14-3, and Jamal Emers is 18-5. Currently, Jamal Emers is approaching minus 160, and I believe Pat Sabatini is coming back around, plus 137, plus 140. So this one's close to call. And at first, I thought the line would close a little bit when I saw that Emers was more at the minus 150. But it's actually started to widen a little bit, which I might still just try to wait till the end of the week and have, casual bettors that see Pat Sabatini start to hit his side of things. But when you're looking at this, so Jamal Emers, he'll have a 4-inch reach advantage. He has fought more high-level competition, and he's had close fights with some good fighters. He has a split decision versus Giga Chikadze, which is a fight that a lot of people think that even if he didn't win it, there was a path to victory that he just didn't really quite take advantage of. He does have a win over Corey Sandhagen. He's good at defending takedowns so far. I think he has 100% takedown defense. He has better movement on the feet and has higher volume to go along with it. And he does have a decent wrestling background. He actually did have a college scholarship for wrestling. But Pat Sabatini, I would say he's going to be way more dominant on the mat. He was a Division I wrestler, and he's a BJJ black belt. He's really smooth at ending up in dominant positions. But he doesn't seem very comfortable on the feet, and he was pretty low volume in his first fight. He also slowed down towards the end, and he does have a knockout loss on his record. Jamal Emers has a submission loss, so they kind of even out there, and Jamal Emers actually also has 2 knockout losses. So just, experience-wise, looking at the striking volume and Jamal Emers' ability to defend takedowns, I'm on the Emers side on this one. I would assume that he wins this by decision if he does win, but it's definitely a close fight, so I'm kind of waiting to see some odds that I really like. And if that money line doesn't close, then I might just put a small bet on Jamal Emers by decision. All right, so let's move on to the next fight. Okay, so the next one, also kind of straightforward. We have JJ Aldrich 9-4 and Vanessa Demopolis 6-3. This will be Vanessa Demopolis, her UFC debut. She's going to be the older fighter, though. She's approaching 33, while JJ Aldrich is about 29. And JJ Aldrich will have a pretty sizable reach advantage in this one. She'll be 4 inches taller, but she'll have almost a 6-inch reach advantage, which I think will really come into play. So she's been in the UFC for longer, JJ Aldrich has, and she's beat some solid fighters. I think that she looks a lot stronger than Vanessa Demopolis. And with that reach advantage, Demopolis just doesn't have great striking defense from the get-go. If you watch her fight with Lupita Godinez, she was getting tagged by her, and Godinez has less reach than Aldrich. And just looking at Demopolis, I don't expect her to do much in the UFC. She actually lost a Contender Series fight. Her one path would be that with her 6-3 record, she does have 3 submission wins. So I think if she could somehow end up on the mat, that's her path to victory. But I just don't see it happening for her, and I think JJ Aldrich should be able to just kind of bully her around the cage. This is a tough one to bet, really, because at this point, JJ Aldrich is all the way up to minus 350, and Vanessa Demopolis is plus 275. And I've even seen the odds be more widespread on that one. So not really looking to bet it all that much. Maybe if I was doing kind of like a long shot parlay where I had, pretty much all of the fights in the parlay, I would throw in Aldrich. But I'm not really too tempted to mess with this fight too much. Okay. So moving up in the card, we have Dustin Jacoby and Darren Stewart. And this is actually one that I kind of changed up how I was thinking throughout the week. So Dustin Jacoby, he's 14-5, and Darren Stewart is 12-7. And Darren Stewart hasn't looked very good at all in his, he actually looked somewhat decent in the Kevin Holland fight, but technically he would be 0-3 in his last 3 fights, and it only has 1 win in his last 5, which came over Maki Pitolo. And that one he somehow pulled off a guillotine choke, and honestly, they were trading back and forth in that one. So if he hadn't found that choke, I don't really know how that fight goes. As far as age, Dustin Jacoby's actually a bit older. He is 3 years older. He's 33, and Darren Stewart is still just 30. Dustin Jacoby he'll have a 4-inch reach advantage in this one, and he'll have a few inches of height. So then just looking at how I was breaking this one down. So Dustin Jacoby, unlike Darren Stewart, he is 4-0-1 in his last 5. And I mean, that fight with Ion Cutelaba was close because Cutelaba just gassed. He was not prepared to have the whole grappling approach against Dustin Jacoby. I do think Dustin Jacoby has slightly better striking defense in this one. And with that slight reach advantage, I think he'll actually be landing more shots overall. And on top of that, what was really a big deciding factor for me betting Dustin Jacoby is realizing that this fight's going to be at 205, and I have just not been impressed with Darren Stewart at 205 so far. Not really even all that impressed with him at 185, so I don't even really like him going up all that much. But Dustin Jacoby, he doesn't have a good-looking UFC record all that much, like overall. This is his second run in the UFC, and then even the fights that he's won recently, it's just kind of, I don't know, not all that impressive to me. I thought there was moments in that Max McGrishin fight where he definitely looked like he was about to lose it. He beat Justin Ledet, which a lot of people are beating Justin Ledet nowadays. And then, before that, it was Contender Series, which we know that a lot of those Contender Series matchups aren't that legitimate. Darren Stewart, like I said, not so impressive in the UFC so far. All of his wins are to people that are or will be cut. He's coming off of those 2 losses to Eric Anders. He doesn't have great volume or striking defense. The one thing that I liked about Darren Stewart, which is why I almost bet him, was because he could potentially mix in takedowns, which I do think is a weakness of Dustin Jacoby. And if he was able to get takedowns, he does have better cardio than Kudalaba. And he does have a chin. He hasn't been knocked out, but we've seen him get cracked, and I think he was just about to get knocked out against Eric Anders. But yeah, for a guy that doesn't have great striking defense against a kickboxer like Dustin Jacoby, I have a hard time betting Darren Stewart in this one, even though I was tempted before. I don't really like seeing Dustin Jacoby at the minus 200 line that I've seen him approach. But as that gets lower and lower, I'm more and more interested in taking Dustin Jacoby. I've thought about putting him in maybe like some lower confidence parlays, but this is definitely a risky fight. It's just, it's more of a fade on Darren Stewart, to be honest. So I'll side with Dustin Jacoby in this one. Honestly, probably just by decision, because Darren Stewart hasn't really shown that he could be knocked out easily. So then when we move up, this one is a rough one. So we have Sam Alvey and Wellington Turman. And Sam Alvey is approaching 50 fights. I actually think, this is going to be his 50th fight. He's 33, 15-1, and Wellington Turman is 16-5. Sam Alvey has not won a fight in his last 5, while Wellington Turman is 2-3 in his last 5. But his 2 most recent losses, which they're all in a row, were knockout losses where he went out cold. And the most recent one was only a couple months ago, so I really don't like that. And I'm already going to say it right now. That's the reason why I'm not going to bet Wellington Turman. But Wellington Turman, he's 10 years younger, but he'll have a few inches of a reach disadvantage to Alvey. And Wellington Turman, he has a slightly negative striking differential. Don't like that. And a guy that's been knocked out recently. And he's been knocked down in 4 of his last 6 fights. As far as, that's Sam Alvey that's been knocked out in 4 of his last, knocked down in 4 of his last 6 fights. Wellington Turman, so he's, like I said, the much younger fighter, but he does have low striking defense. He'll have 43% striking defense. He has a negative striking differential, which I think it's more negative than Sam Alvey's. He doesn't throw a lot of volume. In his last fight, one thing that I noticed is it seemed like he actually did get a takedown. It shows no takedowns against Bruno Silva, but it looked like it to me, and it's not like he was really flopping on a ton of attempts. I think the stats are kind of off in that most recent fight. It ended up looking really rough with that fight against Bruno Silva, and just not someone that I'm going to back as a favorite at that point. Sam Alvey coming in here with the reach advantage. He has an 82% takedown defense. The reason I'm not even really going to take a side in this one is you're looking at Alvey being knocked down so easily. His last win was John Vellante by split decision. Like neither side of this fight looks good. So for some reason they had set the under at 2.5 on BetOnline. So I just decided to bet the under 2.5 because I think someone's getting choked out or knocked out in this one, just given their past history. So I'll just not take a side and kind of go with the inside the distance play. And we will move on to, another rough one. So we have Abdul Razak alHasan and Alessio Di Chirico. So Di Chirico is 13-5, and Abdul Razak alHasan is 10-4. Both of these guys are 2-3 in their last 5, but alHasan is on a 3-fight losing streak, while Di Chirico actually recently picked up a pretty impressive knockout win over Joaquin Buckley. But before that, he was almost knocked out right at the end of the fight by Zach Cummings. Like literally, if there was 3 more seconds, they would have been able to call that a knockout. Which I think I even heard the commentary team when I was rewatching that fight say how Chirico had mentioned that he's never been wobbled or knocked out or anything like that in practice or a fight. And then right at the end, he gets knocked like that. And he actually one of his recent losses was to Muradov, who is coming up later in the card. And Muradov is honestly, rewatching tape, he's a pretty impressive fighter. He also lost to Kevin Holland and then got a split decision win over Julian Marquez. alHasan is the older fighter in this one. He's 36. And then Chirico is approaching 32. Chirico, like a 1-inch reach advantage, but he'll have a couple inches in height. And this is another one where just kind of where the fighters are at, it's hard for me to bet one of them. And that fighter is going to be alHasan. He has 10 knockout wins, which is impressive. But that's the only way he's won. And all of those knockout wins, I believe, are in the first round. And he doesn't really have great striking defense or takedown defense. He's 4-4 in the UFC, but when you look at that even, it's like 2 of those wins are to Sabah Homasi. He just hasn't looked very good at 185. I think ideally he'd still be able to be at 170, but he's not necessarily like way undersized or anything at 185. It's just that's where all of his success has been. And he just doesn't have like a lot of good momentum behind him. He recently came off of 2 years of his career that were taken away from him because of I think it was rape charges that he was eventually acquitted of, but I feel like this guy's just, not in a very good place to be fighting right now. Chirico, he's someone that's never been knocked out, although, like I said, he has come close. He has the better striking defense in this one. He's always been at 185, so he's very comfortable being at this weight. He has more paths to victory, honestly. He's capable of winning decisions, and he's shown that. Younger but more UFC experience slightly. They could mix in takedowns. The only thing is he struggled with Cummings, who I think is a very simple fighter, and did get chin checked. And when you look at Chirico, he's 4-5 in the UFC overall. So, I mean, it's not the best fight as far as resumes, but I think Chirico is the deserving favorite in this one. He's been around minus 200, which I think, he's minus 220 right now. alHasan is plus 185, and I can get it. I'm not super excited about betting that, but I'm pretty confident in Chirico pulling this one off just because alHasan hasn't really shown many positives recently. So we'll move on up the card. Oh, yeah, and like I had mentioned, Muradov is higher up in this card. He's actually the next fight. Muradov, he's 5-0 in his last 5, and Meerschaert is 2-3 in his last 5. But his most recent win was a very quick submission over Bartosz Babinski. And before that, he had 2 consecutive knockout losses that were both in the first round. So he hasn't been very impressive recently, and that is why Muradov is all the way up to, I think, like minus 650 right now. And plus 475 for Meerschaert, which I'm not super excited about that line just because there is the possibility that Meerschaert pulls off a sub. But the more you look into fight tape on that one, I think you'll be more and more impressed by Muradov. He has 100% takedown defense so far in the UFC, but that is only coming off of 3 fights. He's 17-1 by knockout. He has a 2-fight knockout streak, and both of those came late. And I do kind of like seeing that from fighters, that they're able to pull it off consecutive or pull off knockouts deep into fights. It shows good cardio. His submission losses that he does have are actually all pretty early in his career. And really what's going to always be more impressive about him is his striking. He has a 64% striking defense. When you're looking at his significant strikes landed per minute versus absorbed, he lands 5.32, which is already pretty good volume while only absorbing 2.92. So that's really good. And yeah, his boxing just really legit. He keeps his range well enough that he just completely avoids getting hit at all. But because of his takedown defense, the one disadvantage is that we haven't seen him have to like show his get up game at all in the UFC. And we don't know how he's going to react off of his back. But Meerschaert, he's someone that's been finished 11 times. And that's why I'd be tempted to take Muradov by knockout or just inside the distance in this one. And like I had mentioned, he's been knocked out in 2 of his last 3 fights, and both of those knockouts were in the first round. He himself has a 43% takedown defense, although I don't think Muradov, if he's smart, should try to take down Meerschaert, because, I mean, he won't have to since Meerschaert has a 51% striking defense. Meerschaert, he's one of these guys that tends to lose to higher level people in the UFC. Negative striking differential, which goes along with his bad striking defense. And one more thing that just kind of capped it off for me was that Muradov has the same reach as Chimaev, and Chimaev just knocked out Meerschaert with basically one punch. But Meerschaert, he is still dangerous at the end of the day. 30 of his 32 wins are by finish, and with that being broken down, it's 24 submissions and 6 knockouts. So that's pretty crazy. So I think this fight could really deliver. But I think at the end of the day, as the odds are showing, it's going to be Muradov that dominates this one. And I think he gets it done inside the distance. So let's see. Next, we have Andre Petrovsky versus Michael Gilmore. And don't really want to spend too much time on this one. I'll just kind of go off of what I saw in the show. So Petrovsky, he's 30, while Michael Gilmore is 34. Petrovsky is 5-1, and Gilmore is 6-3. And Petrovsky is just getting to be more and more of a favorite in this one, to where it's not really all that interesting to bet it. Petrovsky is minus 575, and Gilmore is plus 425. So I think this is another one where if you wanted to bet it, just take an inside the distance or an under kind of bet on Petrovsky. Petrovsky's a legitimate wrestler. I think he has a lot of power too when it comes down to it. And Gilmore just showed that he's not a very well-rounded fighter, and his one path is just to kind of like slug you. So I think if Petrovsky was able to get even at least one takedown, I think he could end the fight. Petrovsky's definitely the pick in this one. And moving up ahead of that, we have Kevin Lee and Daniel Rodriguez. And this is one that before Fight Tape, I was really thinking that I was going to bet Kevin Lee. But then the more I dug into it, the more I watched tape, I don't know, I just really started pushing towards the Daniel Rodriguez side, and was kind of looking for more underdog plays in this one, and eventually I just decided, why not? I'll take the shot on Daniel Rodriguez. So the reason I did that, if you're looking at his stats, Daniel Rodriguez so far in the UFC lands 8.07 significant strikes per minute. He's a guy that's never been finished. He actually has 12 of his 15 wins by finish, with 8 of them being knockouts and 4 of them being submissions. He's 4-1 in his last 5 and really should be 5-0. He's definitely got the boxing advantage in this one. And looking at some of his fights, overall, his output increases as fights go on. And he's got an 83% takedown defense, which is one of the really decisive things in this one. The only thing is that he's 6 years older, because Kevin Lee is somehow still only 28, coming up on 29. And Daniel Rodriguez, he's 34. But Kevin Lee, he's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage in this one. He has faced more top-tier fighters, and he is younger with more UFC experience. And he could look a lot better in a 3-round fight at 170 than he did for a 5-rounder like the Dos Anjos fight. But when it comes down to it, he's 2-3 in his last 5. 4 of his 6 losses are by finish, with 1 of them being a knockout and 3 of them being by sub. He isn't known for his cardio, so he could still possibly slow down, especially if he's missing on a lot of takedowns. But he does have a 3 takedown per fight average, which is really good. But he just doesn't really have good striking defense at the end of the day, and I think coming up at 170 against a guy like Daniel Rodriguez right now, who's on a roll and feeling really confident, this could be a really tough fight for Kevin Lee. And I think there's definitely a path to victory for Kevin Lee if he's able to mix in takedowns and if he's able to get in a flow of the striking. But I think Daniel Rodriguez as an underdog is almost always going to be a good play, or at least feel like a good bet at the end of the day. So I kind of just decided why not, and I took Daniel Rodriguez when he was at, I bet him at plus 127. Currently, Kevin Lee is minus 146, and Daniel Rodriguez is plus 126. So yeah, that line honestly could close as more and more people start to recognize some of the stats behind this fight, and maybe even just kind of go back on some of Daniel Rodriguez's recent fights. But yeah, it's not my most confident pick, but I'm taking Daniel Rodriguez as an underdog play in this one. So moving up, then we actually have the first Ultimate Fighter Championship fight of the night. We have Ricky Tercios and Brady Heisen, which I think is the closest one out of all of the Ultimate Fighter fights on this card. And so I actually did kind of do a little bit more research on this one than just basing things off of what I saw on the show. So Heisen, he's someone that surprised me the whole way through. I kind of kept thinking that he was going to lose, mostly just because of his style. He was able to ground all of his opponents on the Ultimate Fighter and, consistently getting takedowns even if he was pretty tired. I do think that pretty much over anyone that was on the show, he has a strength advantage, but his striking really isn't great, and he looked drained in the second round against Rettinghouse and really just kind of got lucky that he ended up on some takedowns where he was able to ride out a lot of time. Rettinghouse wasn't very intelligent on how he was defending in that one. I think he kind of went for chokes too much, which ended up putting him on his back. It almost kind of seemed like it was a little bit of like an ego thing that he wanted to be able to out-grapple Brady. And at the end of the day, Heisen, he doesn't do all that much with his top control. So that's not something that I like. If someone's main advantage is their grappling, but they're just going to sit on top, sometimes judges decide that doesn't really mean that much to them. And Ricky, he's someone that's really active when he is taken down. And he's really scrambly, and he finds a way to get up a lot of times. But if Heisen's just going to sit there, I think Tercios is going to be looking a lot more active by throwing elbows off his back, fishing for submissions. And I think Tercios is the way better striker in this one. The only thing that I thought was interesting is that I recently listened to an interview with Heisen, and he said that he had a knee injury for most of the show. And this could be an advantage or disadvantage, but he said that he spent a decent amount of time after the show just recovering from his knee injury. He said that normally he would be throwing more kicks in his fights. So who knows, maybe that's a big part of his striking that we will be impressed by. But that also isn't the best thing if you are backing Heisen to hear that he had to spend a bunch of time just recovering, and who knows how good that knee is right now. So at the end of the day, I'm going to pick Ricky Tercios, and I think a lot of people are going to agree with that bet, given that Ricky Tercios is at minus 162 right now, and Brady Heisen is plus 142. But like I said, this is the closest one out of all the Ultimate Fighter fights, and I could totally get, especially given how his most recent fights have gone, if people are going to back Brady Heisen in this one. But I think either way, it probably goes to decision. So then moving up in the card, we have Brian Battle and Gilbert Urbina. Urbina is stepping in for Trayshawn Gore because of a knee injury. And Urbina was actually knocked out pretty bad by Trayshawn Gore. And Brian Battle, he's another one of these guys that, just kind of kept impressing throughout the show. So, I think it makes sense that Brian Battle takes this one, to be honest. I think from what he showed on the show, and then the fact that Urbina just got knocked out, it's just there's not a lot of things that point me to wanting to back Gilbert Urbina in this one. It would be an interesting story, him coming in on as a fill-in and then winning the show. But Brian Battle, he's looked pretty legitimate in all of his fights, I think. And I think he would be more deserving of the win in this one, given that he's actually won all of his fights. So I'm going to back Brian Battle in this one. And Brian Battle is currently definitely the favorite. Yeah, Brian Battle is minus 160 and Urbina is plus 140. So, maybe if Urbina is able to mix in more takedowns, this could get pretty interesting. But I think, at the end of the day, I'm going to take Brian Battle. Which, with all of these fights, like all these Ultimate Fighter fights, I might not really do a whole lot of bets. I don't even really have a whole lot of bets official right now for this card at all. But what I was thinking of doing is, with all these Ultimate Fighter fights, just putting all of the people that I think are going to win in one parlay and just leaving it at that, so I don't have a bunch of bets sitting on these guys that aren't even quite in the UFC yet. Because that is something that I've been trying to be more careful about, is, betting on these fights where people aren't too proven or where there's a lot of just unknowns. So then after Brian Battle versus Gilbert Urbina, which I'm not sure why that's the co-main event. I would have made Ricky Tercios and Brady the co-main event, but now we're all the way up to our main event with Edson Barboza and Giga Chikadze. And pretty early, I already knew exactly who I was going to bet on this one. I went straight for Barboza when they were just basically evens. Chikadze, he is dangerous because if you look at his record right now, he's 5-0 in his last 5. But one of those was Jamie Simmons, which we know Jamie Simmons isn't UFC caliber, and he showed that in his last fight. And then he dropped Cub Swanson really early, which I do think that was his toughest test. And I was actually kind of just on Swanson, even just from wanting to kind of back a UFC vet against Chikadze, because I haven't ever really been all that high on Chikadze. So that actually was impressive to take out Swanson that quickly. Then he had a win over Omar Morales and a win over Erwin Rivera, who I believe also spends time at 135. And then he had that split decision over Jamal Emers, where if Jamal Emers had just started going for takedowns earlier on, he probably would have beat Chikadze in that one. And Chikadze does have a loss to Austin Springer on the Contender Series, so that's a loss that actually doesn't look very good. That's on his record, but he is only 13-2, so it's not like he has a lot of losses that you could poke at. Edson Barboza, he's 22-9. He is 2-3 in his last 5, but he's on a 2-fight win streak right now. And those 3 losses, one of them was Justin Gaethje. That was a legit loss. He got dominated in that one. But then there was a split decision with Paul Felder, which I believe a lot of people thought he should have got the nod in that one. And then he had a split decision with Dan Ige, where it seemed like he should have got that one too. So his record could look better in his most recent fights, to be honest. Barboza is only slightly older. Chikadze is 33, while Edson Barboza is 35. And their height and reach is pretty similar as well. But looking at all their advantages and disadvantages, so Chikadze, he's someone that's got knockdowns in 4 straight fights. He outlands opponents by 1 full strike. He's coming off that strong finish of Cub Swanson, and he's defended takedowns well recently. but he has shown that he can be taken down in the past. He himself is not a takedown threat, and I think Barboza is really, at the end of the day, his toughest test. And Chikadze has never gone 5, which honestly neither has Barboza, but he's been scheduled for more 5-round fights. And Chikadze has never been knocked out in MMA, but he is someone that's been knocked out in kickboxing. And Barboza has been looking good, I think, at 145. And like I said, his record could end up looking a lot better in his last 5 if he had gotten the nod in some split decisions. He's faced the much better competition throughout his career. I think he's more prepared to do a 5-round fight. The only thing is, he's taken a lot of damage in his career, and at this point, the amount that he's landed is about as much as he's absorbed. And he can slow down late in fights, but we've seen it a little bit with Chikadze that he could do that every once in a while too. And I think for both of these guys, when it comes down to having a 5-round fight, there's a decent chance that both of them are slowing down quite a bit. But I just think I believe more in the power of Barboza than the power of Chikadze, and they're both really great strikers, that's for sure. So I can totally get why the line's been really close and why people could be on either side of this fight. But my initial read, and then even just after watching tape, I'm way more on the side of Barboza in this one. I think he could even pull off getting a late knockout, to be honest. Just because if it does go 5, it's gonna be rough, I think. So I think there's a decent chance that someone just at least gets wobbled near the end of this fight. But yeah, I'm on Barboza. That's one of my only bets that I've already officially sent in. And yeah, so that's all of my bets for this card. Good luck to everyone out there with your bets on this one. There are a few really shaky spots. So we'll see who comes out on top. And I'll talk to you again next week.